The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our live pension risk transfer webinar. This session is just one of a series of short educational webinars hosted by Dietrich & Associates, the leading employee benefits brokerage and consulting company specializing in providing retirement plan sponsors with annuity placement solutions for over 33 years. My name is Dietrich, and I'm the session organizer today. Please save your questions for the question and answer session at the end of the webinar. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our presenter today, Mark Unhock. Mark is a senior consultant with our team. He possesses an unparalleled background working with group annuity products. Prior to joining our group, he spent 15 years within the group pension business, one of the leading insurance company group annuity providers. Mark manages the firm's DOL 95-1 process and client discussions around insurance carrier financial strength. His expertise is also called on to support the annuity bidding quote negotiation process in combination with consulting that delivers great value to our clients. Mark, we appreciate you taking the time to join us and furthering our knowledge on pension risk transfer today. I'll go ahead and turn the stage over to you now.
Great, thanks, Krista. And thank you for everybody for joining us this afternoon for this webinar. Today we're going to be talking about the beginnings of pension risk transfer. So what it is, how long it's been around, and what information we need in order to evaluate whether it's right for you or not. Moving to the next slide, the definition of pension risk transfer is the removal of some or all of the pension risk from the sponsoring company to a third party. The key here is the removal and some. In the past, it's been an all-or-nothing proposition. Through the last several years, we've seen large corporations start shedding some of their liability and some of that risk through different options that are offered for the pension risk transfer. The next slide shows the options that are under pension risk transfer. Some of these are guaranteed issues, and some of these are transferring the liabilities to different people. The most common form of pension risk transfer solutions are the two middle ones, lump sum and buyout annuities. These are utilized throughout the industry by most of the plan sponsors. Insured LDI issues a guarantee or guarantees a rate or a yield curve in order to immunize the plan sponsor's yield curve to kind of lock them into their funding status today. A buy-in annuity is like a buyout annuity, except it doesn't transfer the liability over to the insurance company or a third party. Both of these products have their specific advantages, but will only apply to a smaller group of people. The different options here really target different groups. When we look at pension risk transfer, we look at the different participant groups broken down. And those participant groups are based on target durations. So a buyout annuity today may remove the assets and liability for a group of retirees, or potentially leftover term vesteds and or actives that didn't take the lump sum, which is another option that they have. The lump sum moves the risk to the participant, and the participant is the third party there. Now let's talk about where pension risk transfer came from and how long it's been around. Next slide, Krista. Pension risk transfer has really been around almost since pension plans. The defined benefit pension plans have been around. They were predominantly used, guaranteed insurance products were prominently used prior to 1990 to fund the pension plan or the obligation of the pension plan at that time. In the 1990s to 2000s, the company started moving into equities. And then we saw the bubble burst in equities. And people started heading back to pension risk transfer. Typically between the 90s and the 2000, pension risk transfer was really only used for plans that were terminating and not for ongoing plans or frozen plans that are moving toward termination. In the mid-2000s, PPA was passed, which really caused the pension risk transfer to escalate. And as we see, it continues to escalate and it continues to gain popularity almost to a point where it was prior to 1990. Next slide. So what is the process on how we determine whether pension risk transfer is right for you or not? And then creating that plan and executing it. In the first phase of this, the evaluation, the product of this evaluation is going to be what options do I have, so the options that we talked about earlier, and what are the costs of those options. Once you have that information, then you can start down the planning phase, and whether it should be a partial or an all plan. So in the planning phase, it's what options I should explore and the timing associated with those options. It could be multiple options, such as the combination of lump sums and buyout. And that will most likely be the case. And that's what we're seeing the majority in today's industry. And the last phase is, how do I implement the plan that I just made? So if I'm doing a multi-phase approach or a dollar cost averaging approach, how should I execute or implement that plan? What should come first? What should come second? Today we're going to concentrate on the variables that go into the evaluation. If we move on to the next slide. First, you need to determine the right team. And all these entities are going to have an important role in providing the information that's essential to evaluate the plan and the options of that plan. There are a couple other entities that may be included in this team, such as a risk counsel and or an auditor. But this team is going to be essential into determining all the information that is needed for the plan sponsor to understand the options and what might be more cost effective for them moving in the future. Next slide. Now, there are hidden factors that plan sponsors don't understand that exist today. And these hidden factors need to be included in the evaluation. So things like expenses, investment management fee, credit defaults, mortality improvements. When we start looking at these, when we're evaluating the retirees, typically these expenses and fees run about 100 basis points in a typical plan. To come up with a present value of that cost for the future of these expenses, a rule of thumb that we use is duration times annual expenses. So really, the plan sponsors, when we're looking at a retiree liability, are almost funding the plan as if they were doing a buyout, but are still absorbing all the risks that are associated in it. And this will be one of the products that come out of the evaluation. But this slide is to show you that these factors need to be taken into Now, what data are we going to need? We have the right team. Now we need to provide the right data or the inputs in order to do the evaluation. The inputs are very simple. What is the value of the liability that the plan sponsor sees today? What is the protected provisions of each of the plans? So what is the plan document? The plan document will need to be acquired as well. The individual participant census data is very important in understanding the liability. But I think the key issue here in providing the right data is really understanding the plan sponsor's objectives. What are they trying to accomplish, in what time frame, and why? And then try to come up with a solution or provide them with all the options that meet that objective. The last couple of things we need in order to complete the data set or the input variables are the plan's 5500, and you'll probably need a couple years of that, and a current asset report. Now again, this webinar is just to talk about the inputs that are needed in determining what's right for you. Once we have all these inputs, they will be presented to the plan sponsor in a cost factor so they can determine what might be the best options for that or what combination of options might be the best for that, including maybe just a status quo. But the key here for pension risk transfers is the transfer of risk. And that isn't accomplished just by changing up your asset basis. I'll be more than happy to take questions now.
Sure, I can pitch those to you, Mark. We've had a few that have come in. And one specifically in regards to interest rates. It says, with interest rates rising, why not wait to evaluate our PRT options?
That's a great question. Your pension risk transfer options is really determined based on a point in time. And rising interest rates are going to affect the cost of it. But to determine where you are today and how rates are going to affect it, it's never too early to start. We've seen plans that have started this analysis to see rates drop on them and are not be able to do anything. The whole idea with the evaluation phase is to determine what can you afford based on where rates are today and what will have to happen in order for me to be able to do something now or in the future.
Great. I've got another question as well, too. It says, how do you foresee the pension risk transfer carriers handling the demand for PRT solutions?
Well, we've seen rates rise dramatically in the last month or two, about 100 basis points, which has increased the interest significantly in the marketplace. Now, last year was a record year for pension risk transfer because of the purchase from Verizon and GM, in which we had some insurance companies fill their capacity. Now, as rates continue to rise, the capacities will become full, but we're nowhere reaching a maximum yet. But as the individual insurance carriers fill their capacities, it will limit the amount of competition, which will drive costs. So as rates continue to rise, you may see the costs increase, per se. It will drop because of the rise in rates, but the amount of increase based on the rise in rates will not be the same. And that'll be because of the lack of competition. So we would always advise people to start early and then lock in at a later date or whenever they think is the right time for them.
Got another question in here, similar to what we would advise. Someone has a question. What do I need to do to get started analyzing my pension risk transfer options?
As the last slide says, there's a series of information that will be needed in order to input into the complete analysis. And that information is going to come from that team that is described in the slide before. Once that information is completed, it takes roughly 4 to 6 weeks to do the analysis, to determine what options are available to you and what the costs are of those options.
Great. Well, the goal of today was to keep the webinar short and full of information. We're going to run more webinars like this, brief, 15 to 20 minutes, chock full of information. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending today and remind you that if you have any questions that were not answered, we'll be answering them offline, or you can email any questions that come up to info@dietrichassociates.com. Along with that, there'll be a recording of this webinar sent out to all attendees and registrants that were unable to attend. So keep an eye out on that for your email. And thank you again. Thank you so much, Mark, for all the great information today.
Thanks, everybody.